This week, the Clarets complete a hat-trick of rarities with a cup win, a big signing, and the visit of Leeds fans for a top-flight fixture. This is the No Nay Never podcast. Hello, this is producer Matt. I'm just here to introduce the podcast this week. Natalie's having some time off, but I have got three of our finest panellists here for you this week, with Richard, Tom, and George all chomping at the bit, ready to discuss all the positive news that's been coming out of the club in the last 7 days. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to them.
So, hello, listeners, and welcome to another edition of the No Nay Never podcast. Tonight with us, we've got regular panellists, George Poole and Tom Whitaker. Good evening, George. How are you?
Hi, Rich. Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Buzzing after the weekend, even with the late equaliser.
Definitely. And Tom, good evening yourself.
Evening, Rich. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm back teaching tomorrow, so my summer holidays are over, so a little bit more somber than a month or two ago, but so as you got to get back into it sometime. And what was nice about Sunday, listeners, was that I actually got to meet. I met Tom. Me and Tom had a pint, who I've met a few times before, so that was good to catch up with Tom and his good lady before the game in the Park View. If anybody's listening who owns the Park View or anything, I thought that was really, really nice, and it's been done up really well. So good work there, really good atmosphere. And then George, was it the first time I met you? Just on the James Hargreaves upper just before the game?
Yeah, that's the first time we've met. It's really weird putting a face to a name, really. It really was weird, but nice. And it's not the James Hargreaves upper anymore, remember, it's the North Stand.
All right, okay. So, yeah, the North Stand then. And, if anybody see or knows George's dad, he's an absolute spitz of him. So it's good to meet some of the No Nay Never panellists in real life. And obviously, I think the main thing on Burnley's fans' mind has been overall a successful transfer window with really good additions to the squad, which will hopefully improve us and give us a really good chance to have a good season in the Premier League. But that'll be a big feature later on. But obviously, since our last podcast, we've had two games, a cup win away at Newcastle, which we managed to win on penalties, Wayne Hennessy the hero there, and obviously the Leeds draw at the weekend, which we will go into more detail after. So, George, Newcastle away, not a shot on target, but one on penalties. Happy to get through to the next round?
Yeah, it sounded like a barnstorming game. I must admit, I didn't tune in until the penalties, but really happy to go through. And it's one of them games which you can easily slip up on that. You know, going away to Newcastle, we're pretty bad in the cup. We all know that. And if you go away to a Premier League side, you can expect to be turned over there. But I was just glad we managed to get through. And it didn't seem as though going to penalties affected us at the weekend, which, you know, you wouldn't expect anyway this early into the season. So nice to get through. And I'm sure we'll talk about the cup draw, which I thought was relatively nice. But we all know our reputation. You never know.
Yeah, so there's not much to talk about, really, about that Newcastle game. Like I said, I don't think we had a shot on target. But I think Wayne Hennessy was the hero of the night, obviously one of our earlier signings, and maybe one that went under the radar a little bit. So you happy with that little bit of business that we've done, Tom, especially for the cup games and if Pope gets injured?
I'm not a big fan of Peacock Farrell myself. We spoke about on the podcast. I think when he's played, he seems to let 3 or 4 in every game. So I think it's a good plan all around, really. Like, he gets a year of regular first team football. By all accounts, he's doing really well at Sheffield Wednesday. I know it's just League One, but I think he's only let one goal in something like 6 or 7 games so far. So he's doing well. I think he's someone who needs a big confidence boost. So it's good to get him out there, get him some game time and get him playing well. And then in the interim, then we've got Hennessy, who's experienced, solid backup. I think I'd be less worried if we had to play Hennessy for a run of games than I would if we had to play Peacock Farrell. So, yeah, it makes sense. And then obviously, like you say, he's had a good start to his Burnley career. So let's hope he can pull off. I don't want to tempt fate, but I dare say he might be called on to pull off maybe some similar penalty heroics against Rochdale. You never know.
Yeah, I'll go back to your earlier points. I think I think Peacock Farrell's got the attributes to be a good goalkeeper, but he does seem to like let in quite a lot of goals when he plays, even though some of them you can go, I'm not sure he could have done more about. But I think Dice has obviously identified a really experienced goalkeeper where if Pope does, say, have a month out injured, he's somebody who can come in and do a job. And fingers crossed we don't need him for the penalty shootout against Rochdale. I think that's a fantastic draw for us. Rochdale at home. I've never played in my lifetime. Maybe that's thankfully. We've never played Rochdale, so I think it'll be a really good home draw. I think they'll bring a lot of fans to Turf Moor. And George, surely we're going to get through that.
Yeah, you'd hope so. I wish we'd have. I did wish it was an away leg. To be honest, it'd have been nice to go to a new ground. But you know, at home you got a lot bigger chance of going through. And I think Rochdale will good performance. You know, it'd be a nice sort of semi-local rivalry, but you'd expect us to go through there, and at least it's not a really big team already. You know, get a couple of wins under our belt first, and you never know.
Yeah, like I said, when you're seeing the draw coming out, you're thinking we've got through on penalties. Just don't get Man City away, and you know you see our number come out at home, and you think, okay, we've got a decent chance. We don't have to travel, and then we've got Rochdale, and you're thinking, you know what, one game, and then I think the last 16's the next draw. So yeah, so looking forward to that cup tie. I think it's on Tuesday, the 25th of September, after the international break. And I've seen on Twitter earlier that it's on BBC, you know, for any Clarets that can't travel. But I think I'll be making my way to Turf Moor for that one. So kind of parking the Newcastle game because I don't think there's much to talk about. We move on to the Leeds game, which was on Sunday. In my opinion, a fantastic game. Two teams going hell for leather. Some really tasty challenges going in. And, you know, and some good football from both teams as well. Obviously, Chris Wood got a goal, a fantastic free-flowing move from us, which led to Chris Wood scoring the goal. And then, unfortunately, and was a little bit of a sickener, and I was gutted walking off the turf. It had to be Patrick bloody Bamford, didn't it, to score with 5 minutes left. So, Tom, obviously, we'll go into more analysis of the game shortly, but was you happy to get our first point on the board and a good performance, or was you disappointed walking away from the turf?
I was quite upbeat. It's good coming off the Brighton one because I thought we deserved a lot more. But I think against Leeds, a draw was fair as well. Didn't think we played very well in the first half. Thought we were a bit toothless. Didn't think we had much in the way of end product. The final ball let us down a lot. Don't think the keeper had much to do in the first half for Leeds. And they could have had 2 or 3 on the break. That one where Rafinha drags it past the far post, terrible finish. We got away with one there. So at half time, he should have offered me a point. I would have been delighted. I think we played really well the first 15, 20 minutes for the second half. Deservedly went in front. We were the better team, but just went a bit too deep too early. Invited them on. They had a lot of the ball in our box. They didn't give Pope a lot to do until the goal. But you know, if you sit on a 1-0 for half an hour, you know that kind of thing can happen. So yeah, it's a shame not to win, but another good performance. You know, another encouraging level of performance, I think. So yeah, I went off in good spirits. I'd have took a point and I was at full time fair as well.
Yeah, I think that's obviously, like we always say in this podcast, Tom's always the calm one. Nice balanced review there. I know, George, you was really upbeat from after the Leeds game, wasn't you? You was putting in our WhatsApp group by seeming your giddiness. I thought we would have won 5-0.
Yeah, I thought we were absolutely brilliant. That first half was, I just thought we were absolutely tremendous. Like as Tom says, you know, we didn't create much and we didn't chance the keeper, but we got into really good areas. We were playing really nice football, and it was just that sort of final ball, which either didn't work or it was the defenders playing well. But I thought we just linked up play so nicely. I thought Goodmanson in particular was superb. Wood and Barnes both brilliant. You know, linking up play all the way throughout the game, but in particular in the first half and then for the first 20 minutes in the second. Yeah, it was just such an enjoyable game. The atmosphere with Leeds bringing 2,000, us being really noisy in the War of the Roses game. So I just thought it was a tremendous atmosphere and a really good performance from us.
Leeds fans were rubbish though, weren't they?
Oh yeah, they were poor, but I think just having them there gets us up for it because it's almost like the cricket field stand want to get one over on them lot. Whereas with Brighton, you really don't have that as they're a largely irrelevant club.
Oh, I tell you what, That's a bold comment. Yeah, it seemed like a proper Turf Moor atmosphere, a good Roses derby, one that we could get stuck into. I'm going to come back to some Leeds fans less than content on Twitter, despite what Bielsa said. You made a good point there, George. So and it always seems to come up. I have to bring it up. So you felt that Wood and Barnes linked really well up front together, and there was a threat, which I'm not necessarily disputing. I see, obviously, there's quite a lot of mixed reaction on Twitter. Some people thought Barnes did very well. Some thought he was useless again. Tom, where do you sit on the Ashley Barnes debate at the moment?
For me, we've got better options. It wasn't his worst game for sure, but I've seen a few people saying he was outstanding, he was brilliant. I didn't see that at all personally. He was a bit of a bull in the china shop in the first half. So, he holds it up well, back to goal. He does that kind of thing well, but he doesn't do a lot else for me. He never looked like scoring. I think maybe we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. I don't know what you thought about the possible red card he could have had. I think that was one that perhaps he got away with that one. And I think especially with him getting booked for that one, he could have had 2 or 3 yellow cards. So, yeah, I don't see that he was outstanding. I'd much rather we start with Vidra or Rodriguez in the next game. Personally, I don't think he's shown enough in the 2 starts he's had to say that he should be nailed on for a starting.
Yeah, but George, I know you seem to be, in the Ashley Barnes fan club. I think you got a pair of signed boots from him, so I don't know if that's made you slightly more biased. But you were one of them people in the camp who thought he was outstanding on Sunday.
Yeah, outstanding, brilliant. Those were the words that Tom just used there, and they were exactly the words that I used as well on Sunday. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I thought the link-up play with Wood was bang on all the way out throughout the game. You could just tell they had that connection from, when they were really good a couple of years back. They knew where each other were going to be. They'd flick it on, they'd pass it to each other, they'd play the ball in behind to each other. It really did work well, and I thought the yellow card, fair enough, yellow card. It wasn't a red. The player going up into the air made it look worse than it was. But I thought that actually, ironically, made Barnes sort of calm down a bit, and he picked his battles a lot better after that. Because he had his head on, a second yellow there wouldn't be ideal. So I thought he was brilliant throughout the whole game. Much better than when he played against Brighton. He passed the ball well. He brought it down well. It wasn't a case of him coming on with 20 minutes to go. It was him being in the team from the start, and I thought he did play really well. There was that volley which he almost turned in at the front post. So all in all, a really good performance, and it's nice to see them two back at the best.
Yeah, I like your positivity, George, as always. I'm sorry, I have to lean on the camp of Tom. He did a job, but for me, we look a far better. I know Vidra's coming back from injury. We look a far better, in my opinion. We look a far better team with Vidra in it. I think there's times when he slows the game down. I thought that challenge was absolutely. I'm not now. Okay, well, we'll come on to that. I'll let you have your point, George. He's just put in our group. Vidra doesn't score goals. How many did Barnes score last season? George, you can get that stat up for me in the games he played. In that tackle, I don't think it was a red card, but he's just stupid. And for me, he easily could have got, at times was on the edge of or possibly getting sent off. Yeah, he's okay at being a bully, winning headers. There was one time where we broke and they didn't have a clue what to do with the ball, and thankfully, for some reason, their fullback just kicked him down. For me, it wouldn't be in the starting 11, but at the same time, I do see why Dyche does start him and etc. So moving on to another player who I thought was excellent throughout the game was Josh Brownhill. Calvin Phillips for me is an outstanding player. I was fortunate enough to go to England versus Denmark in the semi-final of the Euros, and I thought Phillips was just unbelievable, and he was throughout the tournament. But I thought Brownhill was actually better than him on Saturday. It was a big decision to obviously maybe to leave Cork out, which Dyche liked his trusted midfield partnership of Cork and Westwood. Do you agree with my thoughts, Tom? And do you think Brownhill should be, starting with Westwood, every game when he's fit moving forward?
To be honest, I think Brownhill and Cork are much of a muchness. I don't think there's that much between them. I don't think the team looks massively different when I put one of the others playing. Obviously, they're both being told to do the same job, but I think what I'd like to see a bit more of from Brownhill is, he's got a shot on him. We've seen that goal he scored against Millwall in the cup last year was unbelievable. I've seen him score a few crackers for Bristol City, but never really done it for us. And there was a moment at the start of the second half where there's a ball set up for him on the edge of the box. I thought, put his foot through this, and it was like it just dragged a really weak effort wide. So that's perhaps something that that you could say that he's got on Cork. I don't think Cork's a great finisher. He's never been one to pop up with that many goals. But Brownhill's got one in his sort of season and a half so far, and it's been a funny season and a half, etc. But I'd like to see a bit more of that from him. I think that's what he could give us that Cork doesn't, is a bit more, some goals from midfield, a bit more of an attacking thrust. And it might just be that, the job is being told to do. And obviously it's difficult in our midfield because quite often you're 2-on-3. So he's having to do a lot of work, get up and down. But I'd like to see a bit more of that from him.
Yeah, I do agree with what you were saying there. I think I'm just, going off how when you watch Leeds sometimes how kind of they can control the ball in midfield. Well, Phillips can dictate games, and I think for large periods until we did start too deep, which I don't think was Brownhill. I thought he did that excellently, and he's still learning his trade in the Premier League. It's very difficult when you're playing in the midfield too. But I really think he's somebody who does keep improving for us. George, I'll come to you now. So I think one of you mentioned it before, that we were brilliant second half at the start of it. We was on top of Leeds, completely dominated. We go 1-0 up, and then we just sit back for 20 odd minutes and just try and defend. I remember turning to my dad and I said, this is going to be a long 20 minutes, this. And it looked like we was going to do it. It's a fine balance, though, because when we was 1-0 up against Brighton, we got caught on the counter-attack twice, and people were saying, we need to be more secure at the back. Do you think we need to find an happy medium? Do you think Dyer's got it right on Sunday, or do you think that do you think that we need to be a little bit more positive when we do go 1-0 up, George?
We could definitely have been a lot more positive, but I suppose it is easier to be positive when you've scored in the first half. Like we scored on around the hour mark. You've only got half an hour to play then. You're going to have the first 10 minutes of onslaught, which is typical after a side's gone 1-0 down. And then you're into the final 20 minutes and it's sort of, you revert into typing, sort of sitting back a bit and defending your lead. I think sometimes during our games, because sometimes we do like press really well and you get Barnes and Wood and Goodmanson pushing up and going after the man. Same with Cork and Westwood. It's really obvious when there's times during the game where we sit back, and you can tell they sit back. I turned to my dad at the weekend and said, it's clear we're doing that now, but clearly this is something Daesh has told them to do. It saves their energy. They can press again later once this sort of passage as play has been over. But, obviously it didn't work out for us at the weekend. But I think we do have to acknowledge that it was a bit of a lucky goal. There was definitely an element of luck about it. And I suppose with Pope relatively untroubled apart from that, you could say, with a bit of luck on our side, that game just peters out to a 1-0 victory and we're off the mark. So, I think it's easy to be really critical, but it has worked a lot for us in the past. So I wouldn't veer on the side of hypercriticality, which I don't know if it's a word.
Sounds a good word. I agree. Listen, their goal was a lucky goal, wasn't it? Pope never really made a save second half. I thought after we scored, we was under the pump then, and I thought we settled it down a little bit. You can look at different elements of the goal, but from our point of view, but it was fortunate, and like you say, if we hold on to that, you don't question the tactics. You probably say, well, I'm glad we've gone back to defending a bit more solidly rather than being too open. But let's go back a few years. I know it's a long time now. That season we come Europe, we won a lot of games by a single goal, and we saw games out really well. It seemed to creep into our game over the last season or so that we seem to not holding on to Leeds. Southampton was a disappointing 1-2-0. Brighton, Leeds, Newcastle when St. Maximin just come on. Tom, is that a worrying pattern for us, do you feel?
I mean, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. A few years ago, that was our trade. We'd go 1-0 up and then we could sit on it and you'd be pretty confident that we will move the lead. So it is a worry. I think I think there was a period in the second half. After, I think the first 10-15 minutes, like George said, was quite frantic. But there was a period where we managed the game really well. We slowed it down. We kept the ball. We started to press them again a bit higher up. And it was around sort of the 75-80 minute mark. We had a good, 5-10 minute spell where Leeds didn't get in our half. And I was thinking, this is what we need. This is how to see the game out. And I thought at that point, we'd perhaps bypass what we need. We'd got past the sticky part. I think you're right. The goal sort of Taylor slipped, and that the deflection off me is really, really kind as well. And I think what you said is right. If that ball deflects off Ben Mee's knee and goes somewhere else, or if Taylor stays on his feet and doesn't get beaten, then we win 1-0, and we're all talking about how good the defensive performance was and Pope didn't have anything to do apart from that, did he? So I'll stick with George. I don't want to err on the side of hypercriticality. I think it was a decent enough defensive performance, and I think there'll be days when we play weaker teams where we'll play like that after going 1-0 up, and we'll see it through comfortably. So I won't worry too much just yet.
Just the last one I'm going to make on kind of seeing games out, and it's something that I would like us to do more of. I'll kind of let either of you answer this question, so just feel free to come in. So, Dyche seems to change a striker for a striker when we're trying to defend the lead, which to me, I do understand a little bit, because he likes to defend from the front. I would personally like us, if we're going to take a striker on, to go 5 in midfield and have a little bit more security, if the ball does break free, or maybe in the box to defend. So Ivy, answer this. Do you think that's something Dyche can do more? Are you happy with him just maybe sticking to his 4-4-2?
Yeah, it is something to consider, and maybe it's something we'll see a lot more of now. We've got a few additions in. I think if we remember back to when we were coming up as champions in 2015-16, it was Tarkowski who came in a few times toward the end of that season and played in a holding midfielder role. I remember in particular Birmingham away, and I think that was because Zigic was on the pitch, and he just sat in front of the back four and just basically just headed anything that came near him. And it was him and Ben Mee behind him who sort of partnered up as a defensive unit. So obviously now Tarks is in the centre of our defence, but I think it's something we can definitely consider. But then again, we were just debating whether sitting back's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And you certainly are sitting back if you play a holding midfielder and go to 5 in the midfield. And what happens if they score then? Because we've got no way of reacting.
Yeah, true. And I think with the 5 in midfield, though, it just allows us maybe to keep the ball a little bit better. What are your thoughts on it too, Tom?
I think it comes down to the point we were making after the Brighton game, which is it's the options on the bench. It sounds good to bring someone in to sit, and I do think
but against Brighton,
maybe you ridicule me.
Brought Brown along. He was on the bench.
Yeah, but does Brownell is he doing that job? And I think then, like George says as well, if Brighton score, then what sub do you make then to get yourself back in the game? It's a bit of a risk. I think you'll probably not be impressed with this, Rich, but I think if we can get Stevens fit, I think he's more naturally suited to that role of just sitting in front of the back four, recycling possession and keeping the ball. Like I said, I think Brownell and Corkin to an extent Westwood as well.
Gentlemen.
But I think Brownhill and Cork and Westwood are more of the kind of box-to-box tear and scare him a bit, where I think Stevens is more of a foot on the ball, retain, recycle possession kind of player. So maybe when he's back fit, if we can get something out of him, then that might be a better option than bringing Brownhill on. I'm not, I don't see that myself personally. I don't see what massive difference that would make.
The only pitch Brownhill Stevens should be on near Burnley is that cricket one next door. But anyway, I understand the rationale, Tom, behind it. But I think Cork could sit a little bit deeper and do a better job than what Stevens could. It's something that I would personally like to do more, because you're matching a lot of teams, and I think it would just help us not having that overload in midfield, and maybe able to keep the ball a little bit better, so they're just hoofing it up to nowhere. But listen, in terms of the first 3 games, I think there's been a lot of positives. I think we're unlucky actually just to be on 1 point. You can perceive that as a good thing that we're playing well, or you can perceive it as a bad thing. If sometimes if you're playing well and not picking up wins, then what's it going to be like when you're not playing well? But it's a point on the board. We've had a difficult-ish start. Got the international break to refresh. Obviously, we've got new players in, and I am confident that we can push on, in the next few games now.
Hello, producer Matt here again. I just thought I'd bob in and remind you all about the new No Nay Never newsletter that former host Jamie Smith has started writing for us this season. You can read it at nonaynever.substack.com, where you can also sign up so it'll land in your email inbox every Monday. Thanks.
So that leaves us very nicely onto the end of the transfer window. This time last week, we was unsure on our options really and where we was going to go. We had Collins over the line, Wayne Hennessy and Aaron Lennon, which were very much squad players, even though I think Collins was a good addition for the future. But it was a very exciting last few days. Yesterday was really exciting. There was names flying about everywhere. Ross Barkley, McKennie from Schalke, an American lad from Bayern Munich. But in the end, we got Connor Robertson, who I think will be a real good signing. So we'll come on to different signings in a minute. Just the No Nay Never team posted, that's the transfer window closed until January. How do you rate Burnley's summer business? I'm just going to read out a couple of tweets. So Adam Payne put, it's very much an improvement on previous transfer windows, of course. I would have loved another forward, maybe because Barnes is past his sell-by date for now. So maybe George and Adam can have a fight outside Turf Moor the next game. Just something similar from Philip Finger. I like that name. If that's a surname, that's pretty cool. If it's not a surname, it's a little bit concerning. But well done by Pace and team. Loving Dice has options. Alan Whittaker, don't know if it's a relation of Tom. Decent, happy with that. Might have liked one more signing, but hopefully enough to stay up. I think we'll stay up now, don't you? And then from Ben Crawshaw, he's on the other side of it. Needed one or two more. Bit disappointed. I think that's a bit harsh, Ben. You've got to remember we are Burnley. We're not, Man City. And I think it's definitely in the right direction. So I'm going to come to you first, Tom. Don't do your explanation just yet. Give me a score out of 10 for the transfer window.
7.
7. George?
8.
I'll go in the middle, then with 7.5 if we're doing decimal places. Tom, I'll come then back to you. Highlights and where we could have improved then.
I think the most exciting one is Cornet. I think just for that X factor, it's someone that we perhaps don't know a great deal about. We know he's got a good pedigree. He's played in the Champions League, but he's he's someone that we won't know a lot about. It's similar to kind of Defoe. He's a foreign player with a profile, but we're excited to see how good he is for Burnley. I think he has what we need. A bit more depth out wide, but also pace, creativity from the goals that I've seen that he scored against Man City, etc. He looks like he's going to add something. So 100% that was the most exciting capture of the window, and the fact that it went on for so long and that a lot of points you really didn't think we were going to get him. I think it bodes really well that we can actually get these targets over the line now. And generally speaking, Tom,
Sorry, I'll just leave you there now because I've changed. We'll just stay on Cornet actually for a bit because I think it is such a crucial signing before we do review the rest of the window. So, George, your thoughts too?
Oh, it's just so exciting, isn't it? I mean, a guy who's played 4 seasons in the Champions League is playing for Lyon, and we've just signed him for 15 million. I mean, it's ridiculous. I remember growing up, and I was like 8 or whatever, and just watching Champions League on the telly and just seeing Lyon. They were a big club. Along with it was Lyon, Marseille, those kinds of clubs who were playing in Champions League, and they still are. And Cornet's played 4 seasons in Champions League for them. He scored 3 or 4 goals now against Man City. I mean, it was only in August last year that Lyon and Cornet knocked Man City out of the Champions League quarterfinals. I think we've all seen Cornet's goal shared on social media over the weekend. That was from the winning leg for Lyon. So I think it's just really exciting to have a guy who's obviously got a lot of creativity about him, can fill lots of different places as well. And just someone of his reputation and talent to come to Burnley is pretty bonkers, to be honest. As Tom says, it's just exciting that we can get these kind of players coming to turf. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him step on the pitch for the first time. I'm sure he'll get a really big welcome.
And George, you always thought he was going to sign, didn't you? You was always hopeful for that.
Yeah, I think that was the case. Yeah, I think I was always really hopeful that we would definitely get that one over the line.
I've just pulled up a message I sent into our group. Young and Albrighton arguably both passed it. Cornet not happening, and bet it wasn't even true. So George ITK there with some really good insights on Maxwell Cornet deal there. I'm not even going to give George the chance to defend himself because I think we'll leave that there. So yeah, you just felt a real buzz around the ground, didn't you, on Sunday? I remember obviously like seeing Tom in the pub and seeing George on the north upper, whatever it's called these days, the long side upper for our older viewers. And you just felt a buzz of anticipation, on Twitter before. Obviously the announcement video I thought was brilliant. And he gives such a nice interview. Despite pointing to the Umbro badge, even when we do something brilliant, we still manage to mess up a little part of it, which I did think was quite funny. And I bet Umbro were happy nonetheless. So just to echo the gents' thoughts, just can't wait to see him on the pitch. I hope Dyche doesn't do his thing where he doesn't get played for absolute months and months. I'm not saying he should chuck him in straight away against Everton after the international window, but I hope it's not long, before he is starting. And then the other signing that come over the line on deadline day was Connor Roberts from Swansea, $2.5 million, which seems an absolute steal. Remember watching him in that Wales-Turkey game and just loved his energy. I thought, I hope he's a player that we look at. So I think he'll be a really good signing for us. Do you echo those thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, I think he said all the right things, didn't he, in his interviews. Might not be the best player, but I'll never stop running. I'll always work hard. That's exactly what Burnley fans want to hear. So he started well. I've got a couple of mates who are Swansea fans and they rate him highly. They're really disappointed to see him go. I think not just the fact that we brought him in, but I think the fee we've got him for as well, like 2.5 million. It's a steal, really. I think for an international player, like you say, scored at the Euros in that Turkey game. If you were to move on or whatever, you probably get easy 3-4 times that. So just from a business point of view, it's a good bit of business. And I think we'd all agree as well that right back's probably somewhere that we needed strength in it. I think Leighton's been playing well. I've got no issue with him as an option there. But obviously Bardsley coming to the end of his time now. So it's good to have some competition down that right-hand side as well. And I've also seen on Twitter that he's got a long throw. That if there was any team in the league that needed a long throw expert, it must be us. So be interested to see if we manage to deploy any of them as well.
Yeah, great last point. I've been saying for ages, let's get somebody in with a long throw. I know, George, you took a brilliant video of the West Brom and the Peterborough game. If any of you just love your football and love seeing the fans back, go on George's Twitter account and look at his video. But I was watching that game, and Darnell Furlong with that long throw. It's an absolute monster. I was thinking, Dyche, just sign him up. We're not bothered if he can't defend. Just get him taking these long throws. And I think that will be a big asset for us. I know we laughed and joked about it there, Tom. I actually think we'll get some goals from that this season. And we've said for a long time, if we could have the threat on the right, which we've done on the left, I think we'll be a really strong team. And it seems like we're getting that now. I hope Roberts will come into the team as quickly with his injury. I think Lawton's been doing a good job, but I think he'll definitely be a good signing for us. Now we'll move on to the transfer deadline day. Normally for Burnley, it's Twitter is a negative place to be. You've got people moaning, people whinging. Normally Chris Borden and Alex James taking the brunt of it, and we end up getting nobody or very little. But this transfer deadline day was a lot more exciting, wasn't it, George?
Oh, it certainly was. I mean, it started out in the morning with links here, there, and everywhere, and then it continued as we announced Roberts. Really good signing, and that one came completely out of the blue. They really did keep that well under wraps, and then it seemed in the space of like 20 minutes since we were linked with him, he was announced at the club. So that was a brilliant one to get over the line, and one that we've sort of needed for a couple of years. Bardsley will be moving on before long, and then we can maybe push Lawton back to plan B. But that's how the day started, and then it just continued getting better and better with all these links. Obviously, Nixon says Burnley still want another midfielder. You know, Cornet was announced the other day. Burnley still want another number 10, and we're all thinking, blimey, getting giddy. And then there was the rumours about a guy on big wages from a big club coming in on loan, which we all found out pretty quickly was Ross Barkley. And even though, you know, these links didn't come off in the end, it was just exciting to be linked with not only just a multitude of players, but a multitude of high quality players. Is something that we've definitely not had in a long time. And we actually believe these rumours this time. So I'm really looking forward to January now.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just that even though we maybe didn't get, say, a Ross Barkley over the line, I know we was linked with the lad from Juve. How true that was, I don't actually know. But it's good to see us being linked with these types of players. Obviously, getting Cornet over the line. It's just that positive thought process for the future that we're not going to be, you know, basement shopping anymore. We're going to be looking to bring in real quality international players, to improve our team and our squad. One that seemingly got away and would have, in my opinion, would have been a good signing was Ryan Christie. Decided to go to Bournemouth, which I just thought was quite odd. You know, what's your thoughts on that one, Tom? Seemingly turning down a Premier League move or staying at Celtic, to stay in the Championship with Bournemouth.
Well, I guess you can understand the thinking that, you know, he's going to play more there. He's going to play in a position which suits him. And if you're him, you're probably gambling that Bournemouth are going to go up to the top division anyway. But you know, if we've got players who would rather play in the Championship than for us in the Premier League, then in my opinion, we're better off rid of him. I think I mentioned on Twitter there was a couple of examples I could think of. Just Craig Bryson. The first time we got promoted to the Prem under Dyche, we could have signed Bryson, but he chose to stay at Derby. I think he was doing similar gambling that they will go up, and obviously they never did. And he never got to play in the Premier League. And it's the same for Britt Assombalonga as well. Chose Middlesbrough over us. Probably they were paying him more money at the time, but he's not pulled up any trees there. His career's gone down the spiral. And again, he's someone who's he might be happy looking at his bank balance, but he's never going to play in the Premier League. And if that's the kind of attitude, then I'm not sure that it's a big miss to miss out on players with that kind of mentality.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is a shame because I think it would have just rounded off a really good, deadline day if we got that extra midfielder in. I think that's the one of the pitch in the centre that we do need to improve. Tom mentioned it earlier. We have good possession, but sometimes when we have good spells of possession, we get to the final third and we have no end product. We don't have that creative number 10 that can maybe add that little bit of extra quality, to break teams down. Even though we've had 3 good performances this season, we've scored 2 goals and 2 of them are off the back of set pieces, which is good that we've got that threat. I think our corners have actually improved this year, which has been good to see. Because regular listeners will know that's some of my frustration when we just hit it straight at the keeper. But I still think, we can use that player a little bit more. Obviously, Dyche looking at that number 10, obviously there was links to Christie, which it seemed like were strong links back. We don't know however close that was. Do you think Dyche wants a bit of a change in philosophy, a bit of a change in formation, George, moving forward now? Do you think, or you just want alternatives to the 4-4-2 that we know that he loves to play?
Yeah, it certainly looks like it, and I don't think it's that big a surprise, really. In the season that we finished 7th, we regularly included a 10 in a 4-5-1 sort of system. We had Hendrick at the time and Arfield both sort of rotating in and out. And I think just since then, we've never really had the player to do it. I think some of us thought when Brownhill came in, he might be pushed there, but he doesn't seem that kind of player. He looks more comfortable right in the centre of midfield, which is completely fair enough. So I think it's just about getting the players in. And it was clear on deadline day when these rumours, they were confirmed, at least the Ross Barkley one was, and the Christie one, we were definitely interested in them to get that attacking midfielder in. So although we didn't get one over the line, I think the addition of Cornet might allow us to transition to that way. We've got another winger in now. We've got Lennon, who I thought did really well at the weekend. I like the look of him again. So I just think we've got them options now, and we can move either one of McNeil or Goodmanson into that number 10 position. And I think it just, as you said earlier, it just allows us to take control of the ball a bit more and gives us that bit more creativity with the free attacking midfielders on the pitch.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that we was looking for number 10, because I would just thought that Dwight would be the perfect player to go there. I think he clearly wants to play more central. He's by far our most creative player. I think Gudmundsson started the season really well, so he could stay on the right, could have Cornet on the left wing, which obviously is his most comfortable position, and Dwight pulling the strings a little bit more. Maybe Dyche still wants him out wide on the left for his delivery. So it's going to be really interesting as the season progresses, and obviously Cornet becomes more accustomed to us, whether Dyche will stick with his 4-4-2 or whether we will start playing 4-5-1, especially I think away from home. It's something that we can look at doing a little bit more where we do get overrun in midfield. So that kind of gets us up to date. It's been a really positive last 5 or 6 days of the transfer window. Alan Pace so far has talked the talk, and I think this is the first time where he's actually delivered on his promises, and we've actually got a squad for the first time in a long time that we feel can compete, and if we do get injuries, we're not going to be down to the bare bones, which is really positive. And instead of this season just maybe clinging on to 17th, I'm not saying we'll come top half or anything, but I think we can look to go towards more mid-table. Tom, I'll come to you now, which is my final big point of the podcast. Obviously, the transfer window is done and dusted. Alan Pace said in his interview that this is the main priority, and once that's done, then we'll look to really nail down Dyche's contract. I know that's something, and I think all Burnley fans, but you in particular, really, really want us to do as soon as possible.
Yeah, but he's the most important person at the club by far. It seemed like like you said, transfers now look a bit more positive. It looks like we've got a chairman who's a bit more willing to push the boat out, make things happen. And hopefully that's going to be enough to persuade Dyche. I said at the time when the Americans took over that the big thing for me was I thought we're not got much chance of Dyche staying if Garlic continues. So the big thing for me, for the Americans, was that they're able to persuade Dyche to sign a new contract. They've made great noises about him. They've always said they want him to stay for a long time, which is refreshing to hear. And yeah, you'd hope that the way this transfer window has gone, the fact that they've pushed the boat out in terms of the finances, you'd hope that would persuade him to stay. And we've heard a lot of noises in the last few weeks that the deal was all but agreed, and the only thing you could think would be making him wait would be the transfer window. So hopefully he's satisfied with the business that's been done. The only thing that concerns me slightly is some of the talk around the signing. So, for example, Cornet, all the quotes on the website are from Pace, and Dyche said, I think in his post-match interview, that he'd not actually spoke to him. So that suggests to me that there's a bit of a shift away from Dyche being totally in control of the transfer policy. That might not overall be a bad thing. I do think perhaps he's held us back at times in the past, but whether that has an impact on how Dyche feels, perhaps he feels that a bit of control has been taken away from him in that regard. Whether that would lead to him being unhappy, I don't know. I might be reading a bit too much into just a few quotes, and I'm sure that he's not going to be disappointed that if it wasn't his idea or his main target. I'm sure he's not going to be disappointed by the fact that they've bought him a £50 million Champions League winger. So yeah, that's the only kind of slight reservation I'd have. But if we get the positive news in the next few weeks that he has signed that contract, then that's can only be a good thing for us, because I think everyone inside and outside the club would say we've got a much better chance of retaining our Premier League status if he's still the manager.
Yeah, really interesting point. I just want to hear George's views on that as well before I come in. It does seem like it's very, very close. I think as Burnley fans, literally hang on to every word that Dyche says and maybe annotate it a little bit too much. And he said that. What does that mean? Do you think the Cornet signing and Dyche not meeting him and etc. Do you think that's normal practice now, the way football's evolving, or is that something that we should be slightly concerned of, that maybe this doesn't see in a full Dyche signing and maybe something pushed more by our new owners?
I'm not too sure, but I tend to sort of veer on the side of this is just the way that things are going to be run from now on. And it might speak to the opposite of what we're thinking. It might speak to the deeper trust that Dyche has in pace. Maybe in the past, Dyche has been really active in, trying to nerdle Garlic along to getting his players over the line, whereas now he can just say to Pace, look, this is the list of players that I want. This is the priority list. This is how much I'd pay for them. Please just try and get me these players. And it might be the case that Pace is now the chief negotiator and getting these deals over the line. We obviously heard from Maxwell Cornet that Mr. President had really sold the vision of the club to him. So the president being Alan Pace seemed to have done a pretty decent job on that one. And I think going back to sort of transfers, we've noticed that Alan Nixon's been bang on the money with all this summer. He really has done, and he's a guy who's been saying for a few weeks now that he thinks Dyche's contract is sewn up and they're just waiting to announce it. So it wouldn't surprise me. I don't think Pace dips this much into his pocket if he's uncertain future about a manager. I think everything points in the right direction, and I don't think it'd be a surprise if we heard something soon.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said there, George. Obviously, I think the other signings he's made, especially Robertson, Collins, are definitely Dyche's signings, and I'd be amazed if Dyche didn't want this signing. And Alan Pace and his team have gone over to France, invested this amount of money in bringing him in, and at the end of the day, whatever club Dyche may go to in the future, he's not going to have the full say on transfers, especially if he goes to a bigger club than ours. So overall, I think it is really positive, and it does look more and more likely he's staying. But until he's actually been signed and announced on Twitter, there's still obviously that element of doubt that anything could happen. But it is certainly looking a lot more positive, and I think this is the most positive I've been as a Burnley fan in a long, long time. We've not got a win yet this season, but you're really seeing signs of progression for the future. You've got, obviously, for a club like Burnley, staying in the Premier League is always a big achievement, whether we do come 17th. But as a fan, you want to try and see us progress. We've come 7th, we've come 10th in the Premier League, so why can't we come regular mid-table and look to push on? And I think for the first time in his reign, Alan Pace has really delivered. And can have a nice little break now. No game next weekend, so we can relax a little bit and then get stuck into the rest of the season. I really felt like with the transfers coming in and with getting a good result and a good performance against Leeds and nearly winning, our season started there. George, Tom, anything to add? Anything that I've missed or pressing issues that you think are important before we wrap this one up and head off to the international break?
I thought you were going to ask me why I gave the transfer window a 7 and not an 8.
No, sure. Yeah. Go on then.
Yes.
Why?
I do. I think I did want to make the point. I think the window's been really good. I think the imperative was to make sure that we had 2 players in every position, particularly out wide, and that's been done. It's encouraging to me that they were looking for a midfielder, a number 10, because I do think we are still short in that area. And I think although Roberts and definitely Cornet do perhaps improve the first 11, they perhaps left wing, it was not a problem position really in terms of the quality of the starting 11. So probably the only reason I'd mark it down was I don't know that we've massively gone out and improved the starting 11 as yet. It may transpire that Cornet and Roberts play 95% of the games, but I think the starting 11 versus Everton is going to be the same, and that's the only black mark I'd have. I do think there was a big job for the board because of how little investment there've been in the squad over the last few windows. So I don't think it was ever going to get fixed in one transfer window. But I think it's kind of maybe important to touch on that as well. The fact that I think we could still stand to improve the starting 11, and hopefully that will come in January or in the next summer transfer window.
Yeah, I think that's fair points and well balanced analysis. I think Alan Pace said in himself in an interview, it's going to take us a few windows to get where we want to be. I don't know what his end vision is, so that'll be really interesting. I think there'll be most clubs, isn't there? You look at Man United, who spent all this money, but they still need a holding midfielder. So you're probably looking at it, maybe other than Man City and maybe Chelsea now. I think every team would love a couple more players. Again, George, then, do you want to have a final point then before we leave?
Yeah, I'll just sing the praises of Chris Wood. You know, we've focused a lot on Ashley Barnes earlier, but I thought Chris Wood was brilliant on Sunday, and I think it was really funny to see. He had them Leeds defenders round his finger. They had no idea what to do with him, and to get a goal against his former club, it really was a sweet one, and he's just turned into such a dependable and brilliant player for us. Easily our best striker we've ever had in the Premier League. You could say, well, if Ings had stayed, but he didn't stay. Chris Wood's been here for years now, 10 goals plus a season, year on year. And I think this year he might go a bit further, maybe even push up to 15 if we can get these creative options out wide. So just brilliant to see him scoring against Dirty Leeds.
Yeah, and just the final point for me, we didn't lose any players, which we've kept our core best players and added to it. So you look at other clubs like Palace have lost loads. They've signed good players, but they've lost a load of good players. Same as Southampton. So I think that's a really key for us. And yeah, Clarets, enjoy the international break and fingers crossed get that 3 points against Everton. And it's no way never.
So thanks again to Richard, Tom and George for giving us their time this week to talk about the 2 matches we've had and the 2 signings we've had and everything else that's gone on in the club over the last 7 days. It is the international break, but we do have an extra podcast coming next week for you, where George will be talking to the author of the new No Nay Never book, which is all about the rivalry between Burnley and them not down the road. So that's Michael Hodkinson talking to our very own George, and that podcast will be out in the middle of next week. Dave and Natalie will be back a week on Friday with a preview show ahead of the Everton game, which is on the Monday, the 13th. So you've got the whole weekend to digest that and to catch up on everything. If you're not already in our Fantasy Premier League, it has now closed. And good luck to everyone who has entered. We've had a record number of entries this season. Thanks finally go to you, the listeners, for taking your time to listen and download this podcast. Your support is very much appreciated. We always say that, but it is always true. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have you listeners. Thanks again to local musician George Gaskell for providing the new music for this year's main show. And until next time, up the Clarets.